Welcome to another episode of Democracy Innovator Podcast, and our guest of today is Matt Stempeck. And you're working on the Civic Tech Guide, right?
Yes, the Civic Tech Field Guide, because it's a field.
And thank you for your time. And it's a quite big project. And how did you start? And how it is working now? Are you alone? There is a team? How?
Yeah, sure. So it's actually, this year will be our 10th anniversary, which is very exciting. We know from our collection that not everyone makes it to 10 years in this space. It's difficult to sustain so long. So about 10 years ago, I was at Microsoft on a Civic Tech team in New York City. And some of my colleagues at Civic Hall, Mika Sifri and Aaron Simpson, the three of us got together in a room, and just like all of Civic Tech, we took a lot of Post-it notes and put them everywhere, the sticky notes, and we mapped out the field as it was in 2016. Basically, we each had our own little spreadsheets of all the different Civic apps that people were launching. And we said, this field is booming, which it was at the time. It was the hot thing in 2015, 2016. And if it's booming, we need a map of the field. And specifically, we want to help grow the field, but also make people working in this space more effective. So that means knowing who is doing what, who else is out there. If something fails, why did it fail and what can we learn from it? That was just the initial idea. It started as a Google Sheet, really high tech. The Google Sheet got really popular by 2016 standards, and people were adding all kinds of projects. And we came up with a taxonomy to sort of organize this field. And just really simply, we split it artificially between the tech and the people. So the tech is all the tools, the data, and what are the functions of things they do for democracy, right? They send a text message to a voter about the election. Okay. The social side of the field is how we use those tools to make a difference, right? So that might be a fellowship or a research center or someone that's hiring for a job or a funder who funds us. That's kind of the social side of the field. And they're both really important, but we end up creating all these categories to sort of just organize who's doing what.
And I was curious to know how it changed maybe the concept about civic tech, also compared to I don't know also if in Microsoft now they still have a civic tech team what did you see during these 10 years?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. I think the core definition of civic tech in most people's mind is probably tech that improves the relationship between the people and the government. And so that might be government to people, or it might be a participation platform. I took a pretty broad view. I wrote an essay about this for Civicist back in the day, of civic tech being any tech or innovative methods, including, design, that help us address collective problems. And so that you can separate that. There's like smart cities, right? That might be about helping your car get through traffic faster. That might be a private problem of you driving around a city. We look at collective problems like how might you, reduce accidents and deaths in cities by cars, which is more of a collective issue in a city. So that's one way we just took a broader view of civic tech. Is it's somewhere more narrow than just tech for good, social good tech, because it's inherently has to involve democracy and power and, the relationship between the governed and the government. But we definitely went broader than just participation platforms, which we include, but we kind of took a broad view. So the field has changed a lot. Some of the hype went away, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Some of the people who were excited about it are now on to other hype areas, hype cycles. But at the same time, the field has consistently grown and grown more impactful. So it's easy to wonder what impact we're having. And because of that, I started just tracking, the numbers of who's doing what. Decidim in Brazil has 1.6 million users last time I looked. That's not bad for a national program. Like, that's a pretty significant impact of people can go on that website and be involved in budgeting and policy making and other important decision making. We haven't won for sure, but also we're beginning to have an impact and be a bit more institutionalized. So that's the other change I've seen is a lot of civic tech started as sort of this outside protest movement. building their own tech, often at meetups or hackathons, and then trying to convince the government to adopt those solutions, which very rarely worked. Government likes to adopt their own solutions. So many of those people who were outside activists actually went inside of government to make the change from within, because that's often where it happens. That's where the resources are, that's where the decision making is. So it's kind of funny. You ended up with people that never really dreamed of having a government job going inside the bureaucracy and learning how it all works so that their work can be more impactful.
Awesome. And I wonder, like, can we consider Civic Tech also like a mainstream social network, like can be Facebook, can be because it is possible in some way to participate, and we have to say that the people mainly are there, uh, and so
Sure.
but it's not specifically for, let's say, problem related to governance, and
For
and
sure.
yeah, also like about the difference between what can be defined as civic tech and gov tech, because often, as you said, and it is very interesting, government, they want their own solutions because in some way maybe they are used to a certain way of deciding and governance. Yeah, what are your ideas about this?
Yeah, for sure. That first question is a great one. We actually do track. So the way we framed it a long time ago is there is a civic product, which might be, an app that's just about voting, right? And then then mainstream platforms like, X, Facebook, Threads, Instagram, TikTok. They're obviously not designed explicitly for democracy use cases. They have externalities that have a huge effect on democracy, right? If you think about the disinformation environment or influencers gaining power as people in the public sphere, and then also sometimes they build civic features. So I'm this weird place. A lot of us like to be very critical of the big platforms. I've also celebrated where the big platforms help people do things like register to vote, donate their organs if they die. These kind of pro-social things that they build into their product. Um, they're often, not the core focus of the platform. The platform wants to make money, but because they serve billions of users, they can actually have a big social impact that way. So I've always celebrated the teams that are working on those internally at the companies. So you've got civic products, civic externalities, which could be good or bad, and then civic features. And it's sort of how we think about it. And we organize, like on our Civic Tech Field Guide, we have sections for Meta, Google, Amazon. Anytime that they're doing something that, directly relates to democracy and decision making. For the second question, the GovTech one, that was something we had to consider at the beginning. Especially at the beginning, we only focused on GovTech if it was about shifting power, helping the collective governance of a democratic society and helping give people more power in a democracy. Yeah, collectively and more so than individualist. There is a huge sector of GovTech that's just about making bureaucracy work, you know, ideally more efficiently. But many of these companies are vendors and they're making a lot of money off the government. So we take sort of a values-driven approach to GovTech, which is it should be pro-social. That's like if we're paying attention to it and spotlighting it, we're interested in it because it's helping people. And part of that is, does the GovTech shift power? Is it not just, for example, one example is say in the US government, digital teams made web pages work really well on phones and mobile, and they're really well designed now. That's great. The public has more trust in those web pages because they work like any consumer tech company would, and we need the government to have that capacity. But if the content of that website is saying that some people are illegal and we don't want, X group in our country, then I think we haven't won our battle. Even if the page is super modern design and loads fast on your phone, I think the meaning of what the GovTech is doing is also vital.
And also, I was thinking that I mean a platform that just help, let's say, bureaucracy to work in a easier way. It is also in some way maybe centralizing power, uh, and so many times I thought that on one side, it is cool that we have like instead of paper, we have something that works better. So if you, I don't know, you have to deal with bureaucracy, it is actually that is something faster. I mean, in Italy, we are very slow with bureaucracy, and but at the same time, it concentrates power, and maybe it has to go on parallel with Civic Tech because I think that a Civic Tech app completely disconnected from institutions, maybe it doesn't have an effect. And it's cool that people that came from outside institution go inside institution so they can maybe adopt a certain platform. And so I was thinking about this union between Civic Tech and GovTech if we wanted something really change. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious to know which platform, if you have any, have success and which fails. If it is true, I don't know that the one that have success have this connection between GovTech and Civic Tech, more hybrid or like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a big question. To answer that one first, I do think a lot of Civic Tech projects that tried to build something that really the government should be doing, if they try to just build that and then convince the government to take it and use it, that often fails, which is a shame because often the product they build is better than what the government offers. But the government has its own way of building tech. And so because of like now almost 2 decades of this pattern, that's why a lot of people went inside government. And this very unsexy topic of procurement became a hot topic because procurement is how government buys things. And how government buys technology was fundamentally broken. You know, people inside government thought that they couldn't buy open source technology. They would fight with regulations from 100 years ago about accepting things for free, which includes open source software. So there was a lot of work just to improve if you help government be better at buying technology. For example, maybe they can buy from smaller technology companies that are more mobile and agile than some of the big GovTech vendors that just sell websites for $500 million on some old database, right? So that's why people focus on procurement. On GovTech, yeah, it's interesting. You could have issues where, right, there's this tension always between convenience and privacy and security, right? I was speaking somewhere last year where I said, I'm tired of having to enter my birthday every time I fill out a government form. They know my birthday as one example. And someone in the audience took issue, but do you want all the government agencies to have the same data across everywhere? And, I'm an American citizen. The second Trump administration started looking at health records, tax records of their political opponents. That's an obvious area where it could be really treacherous to have your data synchronized across all government agencies. At the same time, this is why regulations exist. And Europe, in my opinion, compared to other places, has done a good job with certain regulations like GDPR, and Italy's data agency has been very active, where you can have things like government services, like a digital ID for government, for example. And then there's legislation and enforcement of not abusing that power. I think that's an important side of it that sometimes gets lost. And identity is a really interesting subset of GovTech because, it's a necessary thing, but it's actually very controversial, even on the social good side of things. Some people see it as, helping people without bank accounts or other services get those services. And others see it as a giant violation of privacy and the future of the Orwellian state. And it could be either, depending on its execution, right?
Absolutely. And this is why it's very important to talk about it because it can go in one way or the other one. And I mean, you explained before how you started the project, but how did you came up in the Civic Tech team of Microsoft? Like, what is
my life story? So basically, I was in Washington, D.C. for many years because I wanted to change the world. And I thought the U.S. Capitol was a good place to start. And I got my backgrounds, my first years of working, basically doing online campaigns. including for candidates, but also for issues and causes and for nonprofits. So I fell in with the network of folks from the Howard Dean and Obama campaigns professionally, where we would train other organizations how to, combine big data digital campaigns with traditional old school political organizing. And that was basically the root of my whole career. I ended up going to MIT Media Lab for grad school up in Boston and Cambridge, Center for Civic Media with this guy, Ethan Zuckerman, who was looking at global attention in the media and why do we, especially as Americans, not pay attention to certain parts of the world? And could we actually build media tools that track and measure that? Um, and so while I was at the Media Lab, I started getting interested in, more of this civic tech was emerging, and I actually wrote my thesis, my master's thesis. You have to build something. And so what I built was all the ways people can help in a disaster. I was really inspired by both man-made disasters, natural disasters around the world. When something terrible happens to a community, that community often rallies and tries to help. In the past, we would just ask them for money. And now with digital skills, people can contribute in much more powerful ways, right? Influencers can donate their attentions of millions of people of their audience, right? Software developers can build something completely new that maybe the charity didn't know was possible, right? So I was inspired by that. And then I also came across this concept of civic features of like, if platforms have billions of users, then they could do a lot of good for the world with that attention span and with embedding civic engagement in the product itself instead of asking people to go download a civic engagement app. I think this just makes more sense as a feature sometimes. So that's what drew me to Microsoft. Microsoft had noticed that the civic tech movement was happening and that people were building government technology outside of government. And so, as a company that sells a lot of government technology, they thought, maybe it makes sense to be participating in these civic tech communities, which at the time was a bunch of cities across the US where there was already an active community. Microsoft was smart enough to say, we're not going to start a community from scratch. Let's just go participate where there is a community. And they built a team, including myself. I joined in 2014 to basically, yeah, in New York City, Boston, Chicago, DC, Seattle, San Francisco, and the Bay Area, all across the country, just kind of show up and, as communities are building technology in different ways, be part of that. And it coincided nicely with Microsoft selling cloud services like Azure, because then you could, even run Linux on a large part of Microsoft's cloud. A lot of their revenue is from Linux. So instead of being against open source, it became, kind of a co-beneficial thing. I didn't sell anything. It was kind of an outreach engagement team partnering. We partnered with New York City, for example, on Vision Zero, which was coming up with like real-time digital twins of cities to model if you were to make changes to traffic policy, how could that benefit the city and reduce deaths and accidents? So we worked with 3 cities on that with this nonprofit you might have heard of called DataKind, basically doing data science for social good. So it was a really fun job. New York City still is a real hive of, active events and energy and people doing new things. And Data and Society was getting founded, AI Now Institute. We worked with Microsoft Research. So it was a pretty exciting time to be applying all this computational social science towards like real on the street issues in cities.
And I was thinking about what you said, that Microsoft was smart enough to not try to build his own community, but approaching the one that already exists. Because I'm thinking that this in some way is a problem. Like nowadays, it is easy to build a platform. It is not so easy to convince people to use the platform, and and so the platform remain empty. And so an approach can be like the one of going where the people are, and also to maybe like remove the friction, because a lot of times when they tell you like, hey, register to this new platform, and you're like, okay, another platform.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And even big companies with lots of money have really struggled to, even when they build the platform, to get people to use it, right? And network effects are powerful things. And I think we're seeing now the digital sovereignty argument, and it's happening in Europe, and for good reason. But fighting network effects is a difficult thing. You need everyone to be there, right? And it's another, you asked about, patterns of failure in civic tech and trying to build your own social network just for civic engagement or something like that. It has been a common pattern we've seen where even if they had money, it just fails because telling people to go somewhere and be the first user on a social network is already difficult. And then they have these very narrow views of what people are going to talk about on that social network. Like maybe we want you to talk about democracy, but don't be political. Like that's been a product people have built before. And like it doesn't work, right? People, if they're interested in democracy, they probably might want to be political, but also they can already do that on 10 different social platforms. So how are you different and how will you get that critical mass for the network effect has been a real challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking maybe um like on your app there are like hundreds of different projects, and this is a problem. You said it also for big techs. Um, I wonder if like a sort of integration, and this is something very interesting to talk about, like interoperability between different projects or maybe different APIs connected. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure you had some idea.
Totally. You mean in the space in general or for our product?
Yeah, I don't know. Like in the space for civic, I mean, there are tons of civic tech apps that do not talk each other.
Totally.
Maybe one app has 10 users, the other one has 100 users. Then there is the Decidim in Brazil that has 2 millions. And
Yeah,
how to connect all of them?
totally. That's actually in an area where last year I finally saw some movement, which is exciting. So basically, we put everything like this, every discussion like this, we put into another category. So we created a category for interoperability of civic platforms. It's not a huge category. There's like 7 things in there. Some of the exciting things that are happening, you have, do you know ACTE, ACTE? It's Alliance Civic Tech Europe. So they're basically a trade group representing the digital participation platforms in Europe at the EU level, which I think is great because it shows the industry is mature and it also helps get some of the existing government EU resources to participation platforms and programs. Um, they had a panel at TIC the Impact of Civic Tech conference last summer in Mechelen, Belgium, all about they're basically one-off individual team ups between different platforms. So like Go Vocal and Deliberate and some others like would work together, and they were acknowledging different platforms are good for different parts of the process, and so let's team up. That was still happening as sort of one-off, direct bilateral relationship kind of partnerships. There's also work across in other places. First of all, we should have a standard. There's like public code YAML from Italy, and that's like to describe a project. We also track digital standards. Like, people want to map all the hiking trails. There's an open standard for that. There should be an open standard for participants and supporters and public action, right? And there's been some efforts to try to do that. So that's the whole interop space, and there's a standard space. And I'm closely following both because I would love to see more of it. And it's actually a little surprising given how open source and, pro-social all these groups are that we don't have a more coherent one. And lastly, MetaGov is building a tool with Scotland, with the government, to again combine a lot of participation tools into one coherent single tool.
Yeah, no, I'm also. I know that, and I was curious if you knew about the Metagov that is working on the ontology, but I see
And
that
the
you know.
ontology, right? Do you want to say more about that?
um, I mean, I'm doing some small experiments with the tools I'm building, using some of the ontologies that came up from that group inside Metagov. Um, but yeah, at this stage, just very small experiments. But I am curious to see, um, yeah, how to connect all the different tools, because I think it is needed, and also nowadays, I think that one of the problem and one of the solution, that connecting the tools in some way will also connect the different teams.
Mhm.
And so it will maybe create something, cohesive union of people that are working on different projects in different countries, but at the same time with the same goal. Uh, and people that are doing this, it means that they are creating a center of power. I mean, same intentions, it means that you can build something together.
Mhm.
This is something powerful, I think.
Yeah,
And I
and
think
part
what
Go
it is
ahead.
what we need.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I should mention, together with People Powered, which is a global organization of members doing this work, we wrote two versions of this guide to digital participation platforms. And as part of that, we looked at 30 participation platforms and said, what are the features and can you export the data? That's one place. And then last time we also looked at interoperability with other tools. That might be an analytics package or it might be another participation tool. And it's a lot of work, frankly, to go through the hundreds of platforms and see exactly what it does, because that also changes over time. But I should mention our collection's crowdsourced. So you can go and adopt your project. And when a company like a participation platform adopts and claims their project on the Civic Tech Field Guide, they have an opportunity to say what features they have. That's something we just started doing. It's, a lot of data collection, but if it's your company, it makes sense to say what the things are. And that can include what tools does it interoperate with, which, yeah, I would love to see, not just being able to export the data, but actually having the data work across tools like, other platforms do.
Yeah, then I think there is a lot of also regulations that is good that there are. I mean, if we talk about GDPR, but then it also creates some, let's say, friction when you want to pass data
Right.
across different tools,
Yeah.
and and so
Yeah. Sometimes I look at, people who are working to destroy things in the world, including GovTech and Civic Tech, and they're just they ask they don't even ask for forgiveness, and they definitely don't ask for permission. And then sometimes in our space, I was at conferences last year where people were saying we can't do access to information and freedom of information because of GDPR. And it's like sometimes I think we get in the way of ourselves. Maybe we need to be a little more bold sometimes, but while following the law, but sometimes law is also interpretation.
yeah, this is it's also very interesting that you mentioned this. Um, I mean, because law it is absolutely interpretation, and I wonder, like, because let's say I don't know what the future will look like about governance and so on, and maybe I mean I have some ideas that of course are wrong, and but I saw how, let's say, I don't know, now we have a constitution that maybe can be I don't know, you interpret the constitution, then if tomorrow we will have, I don't know, a smart contract, then it's harder to interpret it. I mean, it's more specific, maybe. I don't know if
Yeah.
you. Uh,
And yeah, then there's enforcement too, right? So, I mean, you're a student of history, like there's the political culture is also a factor in how things are interpreted, understood, executed, enforced are as or more important than the actual letter of the law. And, we're in this unique moment where the 20th century world order is being torn down or hollowed out. Like it's still there, but it's being, robbed of its ability to perform as it's supposed to. And we find ourselves in a position where, I find myself like we went into this space to improve democracy, to fix and reform these somewhat broken institutions. And then the institutions themselves are actually under threat and being eroded and being destroyed. So then we end up sort of playing defense instead of offense. So then there's a temptation to use some of this participatory tech and smart contracts and everything else to leapfrog, say, okay, if this institution is failing anyway, what can we come up with that's better than that in the first place? But then we have to have the votes to leapfrog and build something that's better and not worse, right? So we're in this tricky position right now of defending these institutions that we ourselves wanted to fix and make better, but also a moment where the future is coming whether we like it or not. And how can we use all these innovative methods that we know about to help make that better and maybe move towards the world we want instead of just defending the 20th century order, which I would actually be okay with, but we're losing anyway. So then it's like, what do we do?
yeah, like how to, because in the past, a lot of time everything changed, but at the same time everything remained the same. And so how to not, yeah, how to make it successful in some way. I don't know.
Yeah,
Um,
if you look for the opportunity in the current crisis, that opportunity might be that a lot of things we took for granted and things that you thought you couldn't touch are being messed with. They're already being changed. So it's a malleable moment in the world order. So maybe we can take advantage of that moment to make things a little better instead of worse. I don't know. It's our work that we have to do.
yeah, it is true. Like in when there is instability in some way, it is also an occasion for like build a new kind of stability.
Exactly. And you know, as a history scholar yourself, when there's a revolution, you have an opportunity for change, but also a lot of people get hurt. And so I think that's why a lot of the people who went inside government stopped calling for revolution is they actually gained appreciation for the systems and all the people whose lives depend on those systems, even though they might not know it. And that changing those systems can upend people's lives, even though those systems desperately need to be upgraded, to do it carefully and responsibly becomes sort of their focus rather than just completely revolutionize everything and not understand who's going to get hurt when you completely upend everything.
Yes, absolutely. And n- going back for 1 second to the to the app, um, I wanted to ask you, yeah, from a technical point of view, how it is working, and also if you because you have a sort of database with a lot of information, if you discover something that you were not expecting,
Mm. I
or
discover things I'm not expecting all the time.
okay.
Kevin?
No, no, I mean something interesting for you that can.
Sure. So technically, I have to give a shout out to my friend Devin Balkin, who helped us kind of evolve. We started as a Google Sheet, then we became a WordPress website with a small grant in 2018 from Knight Foundation, where we basically did like a directory theme on WordPress. And then we evolved, and Devin helped us build an Airtable database that then populates a directory app website. And so the directory app is open source, and our Airtable database is completely open data. It's just Creative Commons. We just ask for attribution. Um, so we basically all the time, like a team from Taiwan just reached out for project information about Taiwan. A team reached out last week or 2 weeks ago about funding information in Latin America. And we're never like completely comprehensive, but we can give what we have, and I can slice and dice and filter the data for people so it's useful. And it's important to us that it's open and it's free. There are much larger collections of nonprofit data, for example, that are very expensive. So we're not always the best in a given area, but we are open and free and crowdsourced. And anytime I do freelance research to subsidize my own living off this, and every time I learn something, I put it back in. So the work I did with People Powered, for example, all of that data on participation platforms is back in the field guide, like from the very beginning. Likewise, I worked with Code for All on disinformation projects around the world. And as part of that project, refined our collection of, I think, over just hundreds, maybe 500 disinformation fighting projects. In that work, there's this interesting. So then I started doing a newsletter to, having 11,000 things in a database is great, but it's overwhelming, right? So the newsletter is week to week, special coverage or areas we've improved or spotlights on things that I find interesting as a curator. So that's basically in our newsletter. I kind of write up what are the trends that are emerging, like the interoperability conversation we had. Of course, following AI, and specifically like where is AI showing up? How is it being used on a participation platform, for example? So that newsletter has been really helpful for basically, and this year we're actually going to do even more of this, is detecting trends in social, political, civic technology as they emerge. And I think there's a sweet spot of once there's like a few examples of that thing in the world, that trend, helping others learn about it. If it's something effective that seems to be working, helping get it to more groups sooner can help all of us do our work better, right? There's that famous quote about the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. So like if a new technique or technology or method is proving to be really effective, we should help distribute it faster so that social good organizations can make use of it faster. Because I think there's also this flip side of that, that when you're too late, everyone's doing it and you no longer have a really asymmetric advantage by doing that technique. You're just another person doing that thing that you kind of have to do.
And so I was curious about something that maybe you are working on. I don't know, the next part of the app.
Sure, I can do sneak peeks. Um, all right, so one thing I started doing is using this no-code app building platform called Softr, Softr. We still have our open source web app, but frankly, we just didn't have money last year to improve it. It still works, but we don't have funds for a developer right now. So we started using Software, which is actually kind of fun. It's basically like this building blocks modular way that we can interlink everything. And that way, when you're looking at a job page, you can see, the city it's based in and all the civic tech there, or the hiring organization and all their projects from the job page, and everything can be interlinked very easily. They also roll out new features that we don't have to pay to develop, which is nice. So for example, they added a button for an AI chatbot. I'm still testing that button. So far, it's not that great, but we also didn't spend any money to build it. So, an LLM bot based on our knowledge base is an obvious idea that we haven't done yet because I want to make sure it's done well. But it'd be nice, people currently search our database or we serve things up in a newsletter, but it would be nice to be able to ask an LLM about it in a way that limits hallucination, maybe, retrieval augmented generation. So that's one area. And then on the social side, we're always trying to expand. We have a collection of volunteer curators around the world, an assembly of curators that basically help us see what's happening wherever they are. So we have someone in Venezuela and Thailand, also within different categories, like, for example, drones. And they can help share what they're seeing so that our team doesn't have to be, omnipresent. And that way we can know what's happening around the world. And I guess the third thing, there's always more data to integrate. And that's both, projects about and data about products we already have. So for example, I've been embedding this very podcast on profile pages so that those profile pages now have a video explaining the project instead of just some text. But also like the GovZero team has thousands of Taiwanese civic tech projects that we don't have. And that gets into another thing. We need to do a much better job localizing and translating the languages, which we're hoping to get some resources for that soon because it's currently, we use the original language that a project describes itself with, but the overall thing is very English centric. And that's obviously, we're trying to be a global collection. That's a pretty limiting factor.
Yeah, I was thinking also about the differentiation, the people and the tech. How you said at the beginning, and the fact that often it could be that there are several projects with just, I don't know, a few people of founders that are maybe struggling because they have to wear multiple hats. And so it could also be helpful, like if people discover that are actually working on the same thing, they could also work together on the same thing.
Totally.
And
Along those lines, well, first of all, anytime you have an application deadline for something, we share it in our calendar and across our socials. That's basically how we use our social media, is just to share other people's opportunities, events, and applications for things like a fellowship or a job or a program, a training. Like that's all we use our social media for, is to share other people's opportunities like that. And then something we built a couple of years ago that we now have hundreds of projects using. I want more, is contact forms on the page. So, this is opt-in, but you give us info@yourproject.com and we can have a contact form embedded where people can then reach out to you. And that came about because I started receiving messages trying to buy a certain technology that we had a profile about in our directory. It's like, oh, no, we're not the team, but I can connect you to the team. We always link to the website and their contact pages, but having it right there on the profile can help interconnect the field a bit more. Yeah.
yeah, I'm thinking also about new ideas.
Yeah, please keep the brainstorm.
Yeah, no, something is could be interesting is because at the moment it is just I mean, are people that are inserting new I don't know, they discover a new tool, a new event, a new podcast, and they manually insert it in the database, right? Okay. Now, I was thinking also about maybe because I was also experimenting about let's say collecting the links, or this is what I tried to collect all the links with a bot, like a Telegram bot, Discord bot. So then if you have like because it happened to me a lot of time to see that there was an event, I don't know, 3 months ago, and I didn't know about it. And also if I'm a part of several communities that can be Metagov, the other Discord group, the Telegram group, the Web3 group, and so on, then it's impossible to to see all the communities, to stay updated. Yeah, and so I think that this is something that also can be useful, because I see that there is like an event page that is basically collecting all the events in the next future. But so I was thinking also about this possibility of using technology by itself to collect things. But then it's also connected to power and so on. Do we want a bot that spy us? And so
I mean, for me, the bigger concern is, will it work in a way that's compelling, right? Like, first of all, like for just dropping a link, I think, messaging app bots work really well. I teach at Newspeak House in London. It's political technology college. And, you know, I ask the students every year to add projects to our Airtable, and there's a form. You don't have, the only required field is a link. But socially, it's much more interesting for people to be in a channel where they do that together and share things. And then I can always just grab those links from that channel. So it's just a matter of time sorting and aggregating things. But the other thing is, people build solutions like this that like maybe automate some of this, but then you lose the part where you have a person saying, this is important because, or I think this is important, right? Which is sort of a fundamental part of sharing something with the community, even on social media, is I think this is important. And bots can certainly do that, but then we have 11,000 records and there's many more we don't have. If it was just that automatically, we'd have to figure out why it's compelling for someone to look at and be worth their time, right?
yeah, absolutely. Like I also agree about the possible cons of bots.
No, let's build
Uh,
one. Let's experiment.
yeah, no, I built one. I will send it to
Great.
you. And yeah, then I wanted to ask you like something about how do you imagine like a possible future where like yeah, I don't know, in 10 years or 20 years, if you are optimistic, pessimistic, like newspaper nowadays are like yeah, and also from a governance point of view, like let's say if then people really start using let's call them social networks, civic tech app or whatever, but like they really want to participate, like in the political local life and so on. How do you think is it going to happen when?
So like if someone at the local level wants to get politically engaged.
Yeah, like let's say nowadays, if they want to do something in the town, I don't know, in the town where I live, they do not really consult me. How? So I imagine, I don't know, in the future, but also now it is possible. I don't know if a direct democracy, if a sort of hybrid direct democracy and representative democracy, or maybe, yeah.
Totally. I'm excited about that question. I was brainstorming about this last year with Liz Berry from MetaGov, and we wrote up a pitch that we tried applying for a couple of things, but funding has been difficult the past couple of years. But I'd love to see someone do this. Is like, what's the version 0 of an organizer kit, right? Many of us, or some of us even in this field, we get people who come to us and they just want to work in their town, but they're looking for a tool. and they're hungry, and they're talking to people, and they're organizing, right? They're trying to get, maybe they have a WhatsApp group, right? Maybe they just are managing a campaign from their iPhone. What's the initial kit we can give them that helps supercharge what they're doing? Um, and how do we support them also? Because there's some like training and programmatic element of supporting people like that. And these are the people that are actually making the change at the local level and actually applying a lot of what we're doing. We're aggregating or building platforms, but they're the ones actually using those platforms in a political context to do something. But often they're disconnected from this national or global conversation, and they're also under resourced. They might not have the formal background to know what a CRM is, for example, but they're actually organizing people and talking to people. So I think that's an unsolved challenge, to do this locally and support them at the local level in a way that like works with how they work, but also maybe brings some of the benefits of digital technology, for example. Um, yeah, I'm super interested in that challenge. And then sort of at our level, I'd like to institute more community governance of the project. It's yeah, I mentioned you can claim your profile, and like we love feedback and we exist to serve. And when people say it's useful, that's like the best feedback we can get. But long term, the project, I've been in this place that people sometimes find themselves with independent projects where like I've been the one keeping the lights on, making sure this stays alive for 10 years. And so then it's hard to let go because I usually would love people contributing to decision making and power. That's not it. It's more like making sure this doesn't get diluted or stop running or not available. And basically, we made a promise at the beginning, because there were other crowdsourced projects like this, and there have been many over the years, but they last like a couple of years online. They ask everyone to create a profile and enter data and aggregate the community, and then they go offline 2 years later. I have to say the EU is really bad at funding projects like this, where like 2 years and one day after the grant, the website, the domain doesn't work anymore. It's like, not only is it not active, you can't even access the resources they collected with all these events they did. And that drives me crazy. If we're going to ask the community to enter data and create a space, then we should make sure it's longevity and sustainable. And for a long time, we joked about our project just being too cheap to fail. We didn't have much headcount. We were a Google Sheet for a long time. Our WordPress budget was pretty small. But then we always want to make it a stronger resource for people. So I think this year we're going to be thinking a lot more about the community governance of this resource, and where, there's some clear actors around the world like GovZero, Acti, some of the ones I mentioned already, that are leading this field. That would be great to involve in the governance of this resource.
And do you have any message for the people in the civic tech space?
I don't know if it's anything they haven't heard, but the number one hardest thing everyone struggles with when building technology is like, talk to your intended users sooner and spend as much time with them as possible before building the thing, and before getting too excited about building the thing, because it's always a sobering experience to watch someone use what you built. And it's still a problem that we build things of what we want to build instead of what people actually use and need. And if we can solve that, then the thing is more sustainable. Yeah, that might be my main thing for the builders of Civic Tech.
Thank you. And if you'd like to say anything else,
I
if you
wanted
want.
to thank you for doing this podcast. And the reason for that is, there's a lot of amazing stuff happening in this field, and we're not always good at communicating beyond the choir of people who are already interested in democracy or technology or both. So I'm a big fan of efforts to communicate what people in this space are doing, to get us to sit down for an hour and talk about what it is and explain it, so that we can get more people doing this work. Because I think we need many more people doing democracy work right now, and improving, upgrading, and defending our democracies. Anytime I talk to students, which is a fair amount, either high school or college or graduate students, like, they're excited this thing we call civic tech exists, but they didn't know about it, even if they're researching something similar. Maybe they're lucky enough to have their teacher or professor bring someone in to talk to them, but other than that, they didn't know this field exists. So we have a lot of work to do to communicate that this is here, and how to get a job in it, and can you get a job in it, and funding, and how to apply these things to make our democracies better in a really vital time. Like, this work is so important, so it's important that we do it well. And that's our mission, and that's I'm really grateful that you're, actually helping publicize and make people sit down and explain the cool stuff they're doing. So thank you.
Thank you a lot, really. And it is true what you say. Like it happened to me, but also to other people that I know that you start building something, and you also you don't know anything about civic tech, about the field that
All right.
you're just thinking, okay, this app can be helpful. Okay, I can.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not that you shouldn't still do it. And maybe you have a new approach that's better, or maybe the timing is better. You never know. But also, it wouldn't hurt to know what came before and where they went wrong. Maybe there's open source code you can take, just to benefit from that kind of collective knowledge over time is great. And the more we can do to help that be easy to find, even better.
Thank you a lot again.
Thanks, Alison.
It was really a pleasure, Matt.
Likewise. Thanks, Alison.